The night air was thick with tension as the faint creak of footsteps echoed outside the cabin walls. Inside, Jordan sat at the kitchen table, sipping tea, his sharp eyes darting toward the window every few moments. Maya stood by the fireplace, staring at the flames as though lost in thought, but her hand clenched the poker tightly. They had both noticed it earlier, the truck that had followed them down the narrow dirt road, its headlights cutting through the darkness like predatory eyes. Jordan had brushed it off at first, convincing himself it was just another traveler on the same route. But then the truck had stopped 100 yards down the road, its engine idling for far too long. Maya broke the silence. "You think they're still out there?" Her voice was calm, but Jordan could hear the tension beneath it. "I don't think," he replied, setting his mug down quietly. "I know." At that moment, the faintest sound of crunching gravel reached their ears. Maya's grip on the poker tightened, and Jordan's gaze hardened. He stood slowly, his 6 feet 2 inches frame casting a long shadow in the dimly lit room. "Stay behind me," he murmured. The first bang on the door shattered the night's stillness. It wasn't a polite knock, it was a demand, loud and arrogant. The second bang was followed by a voice, deep and dripping with malice. "Open up, we know you're in there." Maya looked at Jordan, her eyes sharp and steady despite the fear she refused to show. "What do they want?" "I don't know," Jordan said, moving toward the door. But deep down, he had a sinking feeling that he did know. They had seen the men at the gas station earlier, 3 of them, all scruffy, their eyes lingering too long on Maya as she walked back to their car. He'd caught their whispers, their sneers. He should have known then that trouble would follow. Another bang, harder this time. "Open the door, or we'll break it down." Jordan reached for the handle, then paused. "We're just tourists," he called out, keeping his voice even. "What do you want?" The reply came with a mocking laugh. "Tourists, huh? You don't belong here, boy. Open the door, and maybe we'll go easy on you and your little lady." Maya shot him a look, and Jordan nodded slightly. They were stalling, buying time to assess the situation. Through the window, he could see the silhouettes of 3 men. 2 carried bats, and one had what looked like a crowbar. No guns, at least not visible ones. That was something at least. He turned to Maya and whispered, "Follow my lead. Stay sharp." She didn't need the reminder. Her grip on the poker was as steady as her resolve. Jordan opened the door just enough to show his face. "We don't want any trouble," he said. His tone was calm, almost disarming, but his eyes were locked on the men, reading their every move. The leader, a wiry man with a cruel smile, stepped forward. "Trouble's already here," he sneered. "Let us in, or—" Jordan slammed the door shut before he could finish, bolting it quickly. The men outside cursed, and a loud crash followed as they began to batter the door. Maya was already moving. "They'll be inside in minutes," she said, her voice low but steady. "Not if we're ready for them," Jordan replied, his mind racing. He scanned the room for anything that could serve as a weapon. The poker in Maya's hand, a heavy lamp from the side table, a set of kitchen knives. They'd have to make do. The door splintered under another blow, and the men's taunts grew louder. "Come on out, boy. We'll teach you a lesson you won't forget." Jordan's jaw tightened. He had spent years training to stay calm under pressure, to read a situation and act with precision. But this wasn't just any situation. This was personal. These men had made it personal the moment they targeted him and Maya. The door finally gave way with a deafening crack, and the 3 men burst in, their faces twisted with malice. The leader smirked as he looked around the small cabin. "Cute place," he said. "Shame you won't be around to enjoy it." Jordan stood his ground, his hands raised slightly. "You've got what you wanted. We're here. Now what?" The leader's grin widened. "Now, we have a little fun." But before he could take another step, Jordan moved. In a blur, he grabbed the lamp from the side table and swung it with precision, striking the man squarely in the face. The thug staggered back, blood pouring from his nose. The second man lunged at Maya, but she was ready. With a swift, practiced motion, she drove the poker into his side, knocking the wind out of him. He collapsed to the floor, gasping for air. The third man hesitated, clearly caught off guard by the couple's sudden resistance. "What the hell?" Before he could finish, Jordan was on him, delivering a sharp blow to his knee that sent him crashing to the ground. The leader, now furious, stumbled to his feet, clutching his nose. "You think you're tough?" he spat. "You don't know who you're messing with." Jordan's eyes narrowed. "Neither do you." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. For the first time, the leader hesitated, as though realizing he might have underestimated his targets. Maya stepped beside Jordan, her poker still in hand. Her voice was calm, but there was an edge to it that made the men freeze. "Leave now, and you might walk out of here. Stay, and you won't." The leader's bravado faltered, but he wasn't ready to back down. "You're gonna regret this," he snarled. "You don't belong here." Jordan took a step forward, his presence commanding. "Neither do you." For a moment, the room was silent, the tension so thick it was almost suffocating. Then, slowly, the men began to retreat, dragging their injured friend with them. They spat curses and threats as they stumbled out the door, but Jordan and Maya didn't flinch. When the last of them was gone, Jordan closed the door and turned to Maya. "You okay?" She nodded, her expression unreadable. "You?" He exhaled slowly. "Yeah." But they both knew this wasn't over. Jordan stood silently at the door, his hand still gripping the broken latch as he stared out into the night. The truck's taillights glowed faintly in the distance, disappearing down the dirt road. The cabin felt eerily quiet now, but the tension lingered, thick and heavy. Maya broke the silence. "They'll come back," she said flatly, setting the fire poker down on the kitchen counter. "Guys like that don't give up so easily." Jordan nodded, his mind already racing through the possibilities. "They know we're not easy targets now. That'll either scare them off or make them angrier." Maya walked over to the window, pulling the curtain back just enough to peer into the darkness. "We can't stay here, not without knowing what they're planning." Jordan rubbed the back of his neck, his jaw tight. They picked this place for a reason. No neighbors, no witnesses. They think they can do whatever they want without anyone noticing. "Too bad for them," Maya said, a faint edge of dark humor in her voice. "They messed with the wrong couple." Despite the situation, Jordan couldn't help but smile. That's the spirit. As they started securing the cabin, Maya's mind drifted to the life they'd left behind. For years, she and Jordan had traveled the world, competing as sharpshooters in high-stakes competitions. It wasn't just a sport for them, it was an art, a discipline. They had trained relentlessly, perfecting their aim, their timing, their ability to read any situation and adapt on the fly. But after years of living in the spotlight, they had grown tired of the pressure, the constant scrutiny. They had wanted something simpler, quieter. That's why they had left it all behind, trading their rifles for a life of anonymity. Until now. Maya snapped back to the present as Jordan called her name. "Maya, come here." She turned to see him holding an old wooden box he had pulled from the back of a closet. "What's that?" she asked. Jordan opened the lid, revealing a small stash of supplies, a hunting knife, a box of ammunition, and, most importantly, a pair of pistols. "Looks like the owner of this place was prepared for trouble." Maya picked up one of the pistols, checking the chamber with practiced ease. "Lucky for us." The couple quickly formulated a plan. They knew the men would return, likely with reinforcements. The cabin was remote, but it wasn't defensible. If they wanted to survive, they needed to take control of the situation before it escalated. "We need to get out of here before they regroup," Jordan said. "But we can't just run blindly into the woods. They'll have the advantage." Maya nodded, her mind already working. "There's a ridge about a mile from here. If we can get there, we'll have the high ground and a clear view of the road." Jordan glanced at her, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Still thinking like a sharpshooter?" She shrugged. "Old habits die hard." They packed quickly, taking only what they needed: the pistols, the ammunition, and a flashlight. Jordan scouted ahead while Maya secured the cabin, leaving behind a few traps to slow down their pursuers. As they stepped outside, the cool night air greeted them like a slap to the face. The forest was silent, the kind of silence that felt alive, as though the trees themselves were holding their breath. Jordan led the way, his steps careful and deliberate. Maya followed close behind, her senses sharp. They had barely made it halfway to the ridge when they heard it, the low rumble of an engine in the distance. Jordan motioned for Maya to stop, and they both crouched low, listening. "They're coming back," Maya whispered. Jordan's jaw tightened. "Faster than I expected." They moved quickly but quietly, sticking to the shadows as they made their way up the ridge. By the time they reached the top, the truck had pulled up to the cabin, its headlights cutting through the darkness like twin searchlights. From their vantage point, Jordan and Maya could see everything. The three men had returned, along with two others. They spilled out of the truck, shouting and cursing as they surveyed the cabin. "They're pissed," Maya murmured, watching as one of the men kicked open the already broken door. "Good. Angry people make mistakes," Jordan smirked. "You've been hanging out with me too long." The couple worked quickly, setting up their position. Maya found a cluster of rocks that provided both cover and a clear line of sight to the cabin. Jordan took the other side of the ridge, ensuring they had every angle covered. As the men began to spread out, searching the area around the cabin, Jordan and Maya exchanged a look. It was the kind of look they had shared countless times before, in competitions and training sessions. A look that said, "We've got this." The leader of the group, the wiry man with the cruel smile, stepped out onto the porch of the cabin, his voice echoing through the night. "You think you can hide from us?" he shouted. "We'll find you, and when we do—" A single shot rang out, cutting through the night like a thunderclap. The man froze, his cocky grin vanishing as he looked down to see the bullet hole in the ground inches from his feet. Maya's voice carried from the ridge, calm and steady. "The next one won't miss." The men scrambled, their earlier confidence replaced with panic. One of them raised a shotgun, aiming wildly in the direction of the ridge, but Jordan was faster. His shot knocked the weapon out of the man's hands, sending it clattering to the ground. "Drop your weapons," Jordan called out, "and leave. Now." For a moment the men hesitated, their eyes darting between the cabin and the darkened ridge. They couldn't see Jordan or Maya, but they could feel the precision in their shots. It wasn't luck. It was skill. And it terrified them. The leader raised his hands, his voice shaking. All right, we're leaving." Jordan and Maya watched as the men piled back into their truck, their earlier bravado replaced with fear. The engine roared to life and the truck sped away, disappearing into the night. As the silence returned, Maya lowered her pistol and exhaled slowly. "Think they'll stay gone?" Jordan holstered his weapon, a faint smile on his lips. "If they're smart, they will." But deep down, they both knew this wasn't over. The quiet that followed the men's departure was fleeting, a pause in the storm that both Jordan and Maya knew would come crashing down sooner rather than later. They had scared the criminals off for now, but these weren't men who would simply give up. They were predators, and predators didn't like losing to prey. Jordan and Maya made their way cautiously down the ridge, sticking to the shadows. The cabin was no longer safe, but it wasn't useless. If they played their cards right, it could become a trap, a place to lure the criminals back on their terms. As they approached the cabin, Jordan turned to Maya. "We need to make sure they regret ever coming back here." Maya nodded, already anticipating his plan. "Booby traps?" "Exactly," Jordan said. "They're confident. That makes them careless. If they come back thinking we're hiding or running scared, we can use that against them." While preparing their traps, memories of their past came rushing back. Jordan remembered the countless missions he had undertaken before meeting Maya. Missions that required not only a steady hand, but also an acute understanding of human psychology. Maya, on the other hand, thought back to the endless competitions where split-second decisions could mean the difference between victory and defeat. Both of them had learned one key lesson. Winning wasn't just about skill, it was about outthinking your opponent. The couple worked quickly and silently, setting up their defenses. Maya used fishing wire and nails to create tripwires near the windows and doors. Jordan reinforced the interior with makeshift barricades, carefully positioning furniture and other items to create choke points. They found cans of gasoline in a shed behind the cabin, which Jordan used to rig a few persuasive traps near the front porch. A well-placed fire could send a clear message to anyone foolish enough to push their luck. "We'll lead them exactly where we want them," Jordan said, stepping back to survey their handiwork. Maya smirked. "And then we remind them why they should have stayed home." Meanwhile, the criminals were regrouping at a nearby clearing in the woods. The leader, blood still dripping from his nose, slammed his fist onto the hood of the truck. "I'm not letting them get away with this," he growled. One of his men, a stocky guy with a deep voice, hesitated. "Maybe we should let it go, boss. They're not normal." "Not normal?" the leader snapped, turning on him. "You're scared of a couple of amateurs who got lucky?" "It wasn't luck," another man muttered, rubbing his bruised ribs. "They knew what they were doing." The leader glared at him, but deep down, he felt the same unease. He wasn't used to being outmatched, especially not by people he viewed as beneath him. It stung his pride, and that anger fueled his determination. "We're going back," he said finally, his voice cold and resolute. "And this time, we're bringing everything we've got." Back at the cabin, Jordan and Maya sat together in the dim light of a lantern, their weapons close at hand. For a moment, the adrenaline faded, and the weight of the situation settled over them. Maya leaned back against the wall, her eyes on the flickering flame. "You ever think about how we ended up here? A couple of retired sharpshooters fighting off thugs in the middle of nowhere?" Jordan chuckled softly. "Not exactly the quiet life we signed up for, huh?" She smiled faintly. "No, but I wouldn't trade it. Not as long as I'm with you." Jordan reached over and took her hand, his grip firm but comforting. "We've been through worse, and we've come out stronger every time." Maya squeezed his hand. "Then let's make sure this time is no different." The sound of tires crunching on gravel jolted them back to full alertness. Jordan peered through a crack in the window, his sharp eyes scanning the darkness. Sure enough, the truck was back, its headlights off as it crept toward the cabin. "They're trying to be quiet," Jordan muttered. "Sloppy." Maya joined him at the window, her pistol already in hand. "How many?" "5," he said. "Same group, but they've brought more weapons this time." The truck stopped a few yards from the cabin, and the men climbed out, spreading out as they approached. The leader barked orders in a low voice, gesturing toward the windows and doors. "They're flanking us," Maya said, "trying to box us in." "Let them try," Jordan replied. "They're walking right into our trap." As one of the men approached the porch, his foot caught on a tripwire, triggering a small explosion that sent flames roaring into the air. He screamed, stumbling back as the others froze in their tracks. "That's your warning," Jordan shouted from inside the cabin. "Leave now, or the next one won't miss." But the leader wasn't deterred. "Push forward," he yelled. "They're bluffing." Another man moved toward the side window, only to be met with a hail of splintered glass and a well-aimed shot from Maya's pistol. The bullet didn't hit him, but it came close enough to send him diving for cover. "Still think we're bluffing?" Maya called out, her voice cutting through the chaos. The men opened fire on the cabin, their bullets splintering wood and shattering glass. But Jordan and Maya remained calm, their years of training guiding their every move. They returned fire with precision, their shots aimed not to kill, but to disable and disarm. One by one, the men realized they were outmatched. Their wild, panicked shots were no match for the couple's calculated strikes. The leader, however, refused to back down, his pride blinding him to the reality of the situation. As the chaos reached its peak, Jordan stepped onto the porch, his rifle aimed directly at the leader. "It's over," he said, his voice steady and commanding. "Walk away while you still can." The leader hesitated, his confidence finally faltering. He looked around at his injured men, at the smoldering traps, and at the couple who had outsmarted him at every turn. With a growl of frustration, he threw down his weapon. "This isn't over," he spat before retreating to the truck with the others. Jordan watched as the truck sped away into the night, then lowered his rifle with a sigh. "For their sake," he muttered, "I hope it is." The sound of the truck's tires faded into the distance, leaving the night eerily quiet once more. Jordan and Maya stood in the wreckage of the cabin, their adrenaline finally beginning to subside. Broken glass littered the floor, the door hung off its hinges, and scorch marks from the traps marred the porch. Maya wiped her brow and leaned against the wall, pistol still in hand. "Well, that was fun." Jordan smirked, lowering his rifle. "You've got a strange definition of fun." She shot him a look. "You didn't seem too bored yourself." He chuckled, but quickly sobered. "They'll be back, Maya. Maybe not tonight, but soon. And next time, they won't underestimate us." Maya nodded, her expression grim. "Then we need to finish this before they get the chance." Jordan paced the cabin, his mind racing. He knew Maya was right. They couldn't afford to wait for the criminals to regroup and come back with an even bigger plan. But going on the offensive wasn't a decision he made lightly. "They're not just going to give up," Maya said, breaking the silence. "Guys like that thrive on fear. If we let them think they can control us, they'll never stop." Jordan stopped pacing and looked at her. "I know. But we're not vigilantes, Maya. We're not supposed to go looking for trouble." "Trouble already found us," she replied, her voice firm. "We didn't ask for this fight, but now we're in it. And I, for one, am not going to sit around waiting for them to come knocking again." He studied her for a moment, then nodded. "All right, let's end this." The couple spent the next few hours strategizing. They knew the criminals would be hiding somewhere nearby, likely in the woods or at an abandoned building. The leader's ego wouldn't let him retreat far. Jordan took stock of their remaining supplies. The pistols had a few rounds left, and the hunting rifle they'd found in the cabin still had a full magazine. They also gathered a few household items that could be turned into makeshift weapons: shards of broken glass, sharp pieces of wood, and a bottle of lighter fluid. Maya took a deep breath as they packed their gear. "Feels like old times," she said with a wry smile. Jordan raised an eyebrow. "You mean back when we used to win trophies instead of dodging bullets?" "Something like that," she said, sliding a knife into her belt. "Let's make this one count." Just before dawn, Jordan and Maya set out. The woods were quiet, the kind of quiet that made every snap of a twig feel deafening. Jordan moved ahead, his rifle at the ready, while Maya covered their flank. They followed the faint tracks left by the criminal's truck, which led them deeper into the forest. Eventually, they spotted a clearing up ahead, where the faint glow of a fire flickered between the trees. Jordan crouched low, motioning for Maya to do the same. "This is it," he whispered. From their position, they could see the group of men gathered around a makeshift campsite. There were 6 of them now, including the leader, and they looked tense. One of them was pacing, his voice carrying through the still air. "This is a waste of time," the man said. "We should just leave." The leader, sitting on an overturned crate, glared at him. "We're not running from some couple of amateurs. They humiliated us. We need to send a message." Jordan glanced at Maya, his eyes narrowing. "They're too focused on revenge to see what's coming." Maya smirked. "Let's use that." Jordan and Maya moved into position, circling the campsite to approach from opposite sides. They communicated with hand signals, their years of training kicking in effortlessly. Jordan struck first. He fired a warning shot into the ground near the group, causing them to scatter in panic. The leader jumped to his feet, barking orders, but before he could finish, Maya stepped out of the shadows, her pistol trained on him. "Drop it," she said, her voice cold and commanding. The men froze, their weapons halfway raised. Jordan emerged from the other side, his rifle aimed steadily at the group. "You heard her. Drop your weapons. Now." One by one, the men complied, their confidence evaporating under the weight of the couple's precision. The leader, however, hesitated, his jaw clenched in defiance. "You think this is over?" he spat. "You don't have the guts to finish this." Maya stepped closer, her eyes locked on his. "Try me." The leader's bravado faltered, but he wasn't ready to back down completely. "You don't get it, do you? This isn't about you. It's about making sure people like you know your place." Jordan's voice cut through the tension like a blade. "And where exactly do you think our place is?" The leader sneered. "Not here." Maya's grip on her pistol tightened, but her voice remained calm. "You've had your fun. Now, here's how this ends. You leave, and you don't come back. Ever. Or we make sure you can't. Jordan and Maya didn't lower their weapons until the men had gathered their things and started walking away, their heads low and their spirits broken. As the sun rose over the forest, Jordan and Maya stood in the clearing, watching the criminals disappear into the distance. For the first time in what felt like hours, they allowed themselves to relax. Maya let out a long breath, holstering her pistol. Think they'll stay gone this time? Jordan slung his rifle over his shoulder. If they're smart, they will. She looked at him, a faint smile playing on her lips. And if they're not? Jordan shrugged. Then we'll be ready. The forest was quiet now, but the weight of what had just happened lingered. Jordan and Maya stood for a moment in the clearing, catching their breath. The air was cold, and the faint orange hue of dawn began to peek through the trees. We need to get out of here, Maya said, breaking the silence. She glanced around the campsite, her sharp eyes scanning for anything useful the criminals might have left behind. Jordan nodded. Yeah, they're running scared now, but that won't last. Men like that? They're stubborn. They'll come back when they think they can win. As they sifted through the remnants of the campsite, Jordan found a folded map tucked under a crate. It was marked with hand-drawn circles and X's, some near the cabin and others deeper into the woods. They've been scouting the area, he said, handing the map to Maya. She unfolded it, her brow furrowing. This isn't random. These marks, they've been watching us since we got here. Jordan's jaw tightened. Looks like we weren't just a target of opportunity. They planned this. Back at the cabin, Jordan and Maya spread the map out on the kitchen table. Despite the destruction from the earlier attack, the space still served as their makeshift headquarters. Maya traced the circles and X's with her finger, connecting the dots. They've marked every major road, every trail, and every isolated spot around here, she said. This isn't just about us. They've been using this area for something bigger. Jordan studied the map, his mind racing. Smuggling, maybe? Drugs, guns, whatever it is, we stumbled into their territory. And they don't like trespassers, Maya added grimly. She folded the map and looked at Jordan. So what do we do now? We use this, he said, holding up the map. If we know their routes, we can stay ahead of them, and maybe even figure out what they're really up to. Maya crossed her arms, leaning against the table. You're talking about going on the offensive again. Jordan met her gaze. We don't have a choice. If we just leave, they'll keep coming after us. But if we hit them where it hurts, we might be able to stop this for good. Jordan and Maya spent the next few hours preparing for their next move. Using the map, they identified a central location marked with a large X, a secluded warehouse near the edge of the forest. This has to be their base of operations, Jordan said. If we can take it out, we'll cut the head off the snake. Maya nodded, her determination unwavering. And if we run into more of them? We do what we always do, Jordan said with a faint smile. Adapt, outsmart, and survive. The couple packed their gear, including the pistols, the rifle, and the remaining traps they had salvaged from the cabin. As they stepped out into the morning light, the forest seemed almost peaceful, a stark contrast to the chaos they had endured the night before. Ready? Jordan asked, his hand resting on the rifle slung over his shoulder. Maya adjusted her backpack and gave him a confident nod. Always. By mid-afternoon, Jordan and Maya reached the edge of the forest, where the warehouse loomed like a forgotten relic. The building was old and weathered, its metal siding rusted and covered in graffiti. Trucks were parked haphazardly around the property, and faint voices carried on the wind. They're here, Maya said, crouching low behind a cluster of bushes. She scanned the area, counting at least 6 men patrolling outside. Jordan nodded. And probably more inside. We'll need to be careful. The couple moved silently, using the trees and overgrown brush as cover. Jordan took point, his sharp eyes watching every movement while Maya covered their flank. They reached the side of the warehouse undetected, pressing themselves against the cold metal wall. From this vantage point, they could see more clearly into the building through a set of broken windows. Inside, Men were gathered around tables covered in crates and cash. Guns lined the walls, and the faint smell of gasoline lingered in the air. "Looks like we were right," Jordan whispered. "They're running guns, and maybe more." Maya's eyes narrowed. "Let's put an end to it." The first guard never saw them coming. Jordan moved swiftly, disarming him with a single calculated strike before knocking him unconscious. They slipped inside through a side door, their steps silent on the concrete floor. The interior of the warehouse was a maze of crates and machinery, providing plenty of cover as they moved deeper into enemy territory. One by one, they neutralized the guards, using their sharpshooting precision and years of training to take down their targets without making a sound. But as they approached the main room, the faint hum of a generator masked the sound of footsteps behind them. "Drop your weapons!" a voice growled from the shadows. Jordan and Maya froze, their hands instinctively tightening on their guns. Slowly, they turned to see three men standing behind them, guns drawn. The leader of the criminals stepped forward, his cruel smile returning. "You didn't really think you could sneak in here without us noticing, did you?" Maya's mind raced, calculating their odds. The men had the advantage, for now. But she knew that in a matter of seconds, the tables could turn. Jordan raised his hands slightly, his calm demeanor masking the tension building inside him. "Looks like you caught us. Now what?" The leader chuckled. "Now, we settle this once and for all." Before the leader could give the order to fire, Maya acted. With a lightning-fast motion, she kicked over a nearby crate, sending its contents spilling across the floor. The distraction was enough for Jordan to draw his weapon, his shot hitting one of the men's guns and sending it flying. Chaos erupted as Maya and Jordan dove for cover, using the scattered crates and machinery to shield themselves. Bullets ricocheted off metal, the air thick with the sound of gunfire. Jordan fired with precision, each shot finding its mark. Maya flanked the remaining men, her movements swift and calculated. Within moments, the couple had regained the upper hand, forcing the criminals to retreat deeper into the warehouse. As the dust settled, the leader found himself cornered, his weapon empty, and his confidence shattered. Jordan and Maya stood before him, their guns trained on him. "You don't belong here," the leader spat, his voice trembling with anger. Jordan's gaze was steady. "Neither do you." Maya stepped forward, her voice cold and unwavering. "This is your last chance. Leave, disappear, and don't ever come back." The leader hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Fine. You win." Jordan and Maya watched as he fled into the woods, leaving the warehouse and his operation behind. Jordan and Maya stood in the center of the warehouse, the silence pressing in around them now that the gunfire had ceased. The smell of gunpowder and oil lingered in the air, mingling with the faint metallic tang of spilled gasoline. Crates of weapons and cash were scattered around, evidence of the operation the criminals had been running for who knew how long. Maya lowered her pistol but kept it ready in her hand. "You think he'll stay gone this time?" Jordan glanced at the open door where the leader had disappeared moments earlier. "People like him don't know when to quit, but he's running scared now. That gives us a little breathing room." Maya nodded, her sharp gaze moving to the crates. "So what do we do about all this?" The couple began inspecting the warehouse more closely, uncovering even more than they'd expected. Alongside the guns were drugs, counterfeit money, and maps detailing planned routes for smuggling operations across the state. It was a criminal empire in miniature, and they had stumbled right into the heart of it. "We can't just leave this here," Maya said, lifting a map off one of the tables. "Even if they don't come back, someone else will find it." Jordan nodded, thinking quickly. "We'll destroy it. Everything." Maya raised an eyebrow. "Everything?" He gestured to the gasoline drums stacked against the wall. "It's the only way to make sure this ends here." The plan was simple. Rig the warehouse with gasoline and set it alight. The blaze would destroy the evidence and send a clear message to anyone who thought about picking up where the criminals had left off. Jordan and Maya worked efficiently, dousing the crates and walls with gasoline, leaving a trail leading to the entrance. As Maya struck a match, she hesitated for just a moment. "This feels a little dramatic," she said with a smirk. Jordan gave her a wry smile. "Sometimes drama gets the point across." She tossed the match, and the trail of gasoline ignited with a roar. The flames spread quickly, devouring the wooden crates and licking up the walls. The couple stepped outside, watching as the fire engulfed the warehouse. As the flames climbed higher into the sky, Maya turned to Jordan. "So what now?" Jordan shrugged, his expression thoughtful. "We head back to the cabin, grab whatever's left, and move on. This place has too much history now." She nodded, understanding the unspoken truth. They couldn't stay here, not after everything that had happened. But for the first time in days, she felt a sense of closure. "Think they'll come after us?" she asked. Jordan's lips curved into a small, confident smile. "If they're smart, no. If they're not, well, we'll be ready." By the time they returned to the cabin, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the forest. The damage from the earlier attacks was clear: broken windows, splintered wood, and the lingering smell of smoke from their traps. Maya sighed, leaning against the porch railing. "I'll miss this place. It had potential." Jordan chuckled, joining her. "Yeah, maybe next time we pick a vacation spot, we do a little more research." She laughed, the sound light and genuine despite the tension of the past few days. "Deal." The couple packed quickly, taking only what they could carry. As Maya folded the map they had taken from the warehouse, she paused, her brow furrowing. "What is it?" Jordan asked, glancing over. "This mark here," she said, pointing to a small X on the map that they hadn't noticed before. "It's not near any of the smuggling routes. It's just here, by itself." Jordan studied the map, his curiosity piqued. "Think it's important?" "Only one way to find out," she said, slipping the map into her bag. With their bags packed and the cabin secured as best as they could manage, Jordan and Maya set off in the direction of the mysterious mark. The forest was quiet, the only sound the crunch of leaves beneath their boots. As they drew closer to the marked location, the air seemed to grow heavier, the trees pressing in around them. Finally, they reached a small clearing, where the remnants of an old campsite lay abandoned. "What is this?" Maya murmured, stepping closer. The site was eerily still, as though it had been left in a hurry. A rusted metal box sat partially buried in the dirt, its lid slightly ajar. Jordan crouched down, opening the box carefully. Inside, he found a stack of documents, yellowed with age but still legible. His brow furrowed as he skimmed the pages. This isn't just about smuggling." Maya knelt beside him, her eyes scanning the papers. "What do you mean?" "These documents," Jordan said, holding up a page. "They're government records. Names, locations, transactions. If this is real, it's a link to something much bigger than just a few criminals." Before they could process the implications of their discovery, the sound of voices reached their ears. Jordan and Maya exchanged a tense glance, their hands instinctively going to their weapons. "Looks like we're not the only ones interested in this place," Maya said quietly. Jordan nodded, his expression grim. "Then we'd better make sure we leave with answers, and not in pieces." Jordan and Maya pressed themselves against the trees at the edge of the clearing, their breathing steady and quiet. The voices grew louder, distinct now. 3 men approaching, their silhouettes visible through the trees. One of them carried a flashlight, its beams sweeping across the forest floor. "They're looking for the box," Maya whispered, her voice barely audible. Jordan nodded, his grip on his pistol tightening. "They must have known we'd find this place. They're trying to cover their tracks." The men stepped into the clearing, their focus on the campsite. "It's gotta be here," one of them said, his voice gruff and impatient. "Boss said he left it by the fire pit." Another man kicked at the dirt near the fire pit, sending a cloud of dust into the air. "If it's not here, someone else got to it first." Jordan glanced at Maya, his eyes narrowing. "We can't let them take this back. Whatever's in these documents, it's important." Maya nodded, her hand brushing the pistol holstered at her hip. "What's the play?" Jordan's mind worked quickly, assessing their options. "We need to split them up. If they're distracted, they'll be easier to handle." Maya smirked. "I'll take the loud one." Without waiting for a response, she moved silently to the left, her figure disappearing into the shadows. Jordan stayed low, circling around the right side of the clearing. He positioned himself near the edge, where he had a clear view of the men. The one with the flashlight had knelt by the fire pit, muttering curses under his breath, while the other two stood nearby, their weapons slung carelessly over their shoulders. Maya struck first. A sharp whistle cut through the night, drawing the men's attention. "Who's there?" one of them barked, turning toward the sound. "Go check it out," the gruff one ordered, waving the man with the flashlight toward the trees. The man hesitated, then stepped cautiously toward the shadows where Maya had disappeared. Jordan watched as the flashlight's beam flickered and swayed, following its owner deeper into the forest. The moment the man was out of sight, Jordan moved. He stepped into the clearing with precision, his pistol trained on the two remaining men. "Hands up," he said, his voice calm but commanding. The men froze, their surprise quickly turning to anger. "Who the hell?" "I said hands up," Jordan repeated, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Now." The gruff man glared at him but complied, raising his hands slowly. The other followed suit, his eyes darting nervously between Jordan and the tree line. A muffled thud and a yelp of pain echoed from the forest, followed by the sound of footsteps. Moments later, Maya emerged, dragging the man with the flashlight behind her. He stumbled, clutching his side where she'd landed a well-placed blow. "Got him," she said, shoving the man into the clearing. Jordan gave her a nod, his pistol never wavering. "Good timing," the gruff man sneered. "You think you've won? You have no idea what you're dealing with." Maya tilted her head, her expression sharp. "Then maybe you should enlighten us." Jordan motioned for the men to sit, keeping his gun trained on them while Maya tied their hands with rope she'd taken from the campsite. Once they were secure, she crouched in front of the leader, her gaze piercing. "Start talking," she said. "What's so important about this place? And what's in those documents?" The man's sneer faltered, but he quickly recovered. "You think I'm going to tell you anything? You're wasting your time." Maya smiled faintly, the kind of smile that made people uneasy. "You're not in a position to waste hours, so I'll ask again. What's in the documents?" The man hesitated, his eyes flicking toward the box still sitting near the fire pit. Finally, he muttered, "It's bigger than you think. That's all I'm saying." Maya leaned closer, her voice cold. "Bigger how?" The man's jaw tightened. "It's not just smuggling. The boss has connections, real connections. Higher-ups, people who can make you disappear without a trace." Jordan and Maya exchanged a glance, the weight of the man's words sinking in. This wasn't just a small-time criminal operation. It was part of something much larger, something dangerous. Jordan stepped forward, his expression unreadable. "Who are these higher-ups? Names?" The man shook his head. "I don't know, I swear. All I know is they pay well, and they don't ask questions." Maya studied him for a moment, then stood. "He's telling the truth," she said quietly to Jordan. "But that doesn't mean we're done here." Maya studied him for a moment, then stood. "He's telling the truth," she said quietly to Jordan. "But that doesn't mean we're done here." With the men tied and disarmed, Jordan and Maya turned their attention to the documents. They skimmed through the pages, piecing together a picture of the operation. Names, addresses, bank accounts. It was all there, evidence of a sprawling network of corruption and crime. "This is enough to bring them down," Maya said, her voice low. "If we can get this to the right people." Jordan nodded, but his expression remained tense. "It's a big if. We don't know who we can trust. If the wrong people see this, we're putting a target on our backs." "Then we play it smart," Maya said. "We find someone outside the system, someone who can help without getting us killed." As they packed the documents and prepared to leave, the tied-up men glared at them, their defiance unbroken. "You're making a mistake," the gruff man growled. "You're in over your heads." Jordan turned to him, his expression calm but firm. "Maybe. But at least we're not running scared." With that, he and Maya disappeared into the forest, leaving the men behind. The documents in their possession were a lifeline and a liability. But one thing was certain, their fight was far from over. The forest seemed darker now, the trees closing in as Jordan and Maya navigated their way back toward the cabin. The weight of the documents in Jordan's pack felt heavier than it should have been, a constant reminder of the danger they had just walked into. "We've got the evidence," Maya said, breaking the tense silence. "But now we've made ourselves a problem for whoever's running this operation." Jordan nodded, his eyes scanning the shadows around them. "We knew the second we took that box that we weren't walking away clean. They're going to come after us." Maya smirked, her tone laced with determination. "Let them try." Unbeknownst to Jordan and Maya, the leader of the criminal group hadn't gone far. Back at a hidden camp deeper in the woods, he stood with a phone pressed to his ear, his expression dark. "We lost the documents," he said into the receiver. "Some couple got the drop on us. They're trained, military maybe." The voice on the other end was calm, but cold. "That's unacceptable. Those documents cannot fall into the wrong hands. You know what to do." The leader clenched his jaw. "I'll take care of it." "See that you do," the voice replied. "And this time, don't underestimate them." The call ended, and the leader turned to his remaining men, his eyes blazing with fury. "We're going after them, all of them." Back at the cabin, Jordan and Maya quickly packed their essentials. The cabin was no longer safe. It was a liability. They needed to stay mobile and keep the documents out of the hands of the criminals. "Where do we go?" Maya asked as she shoved the last of their supplies into a bag. "We need to find someone who can help us," Jordan said. "Someone outside the system, like you said. I know a guy, former journalist. He's dealt with people like this before." Maya raised an eyebrow. "You trust him?" "I trust him enough," Jordan replied. "And right now, that's all we've got." The couple left the cabin just as night fell, their footsteps muffled by the forest floor. They moved quickly but carefully, staying off the main paths and keeping an eye out for any signs of pursuit. Hours passed in tense silence, the only sounds the rustling of leaves and the occasional hoot of an owl. Jordan led the way, his sharp eyes scanning the terrain, while Maya covered their rear, her pistol ready. Finally, they reached a dirt road that led toward the nearest town. Jordan stopped, his hand raised in a signal to halt. "Wait," he said, his voice low. "Something's off." Maya froze, her eyes narrowing. "What do you mean?" Jordan pointed to a set of tire tracks in the dirt. "These are fresh. Someone's been through here recently, and they're not locals." Maya's grip on her pistol tightened. "They're tracking us." Before they could react, the faint sound of an engine reached their ears. A truck's headlights appeared in the distance, growing brighter as it barreled down the road toward them. "Move!" Jordan shouted, pulling Maya into the cover of the trees. The truck skidded to a stop near their position, and 4 men jumped out, their weapons drawn. "They can't be far," one of them yelled. "Spread out and find them." Jordan and Maya crouched low, their breathing controlled. They exchanged a glance, silently communicating their next move. Jordan gestured toward the men, then pointed to himself and Maya. The plan was clear: divide and conquer. Jordan moved to the left, keeping low as he flanked one of the men. With silent precision, he grabbed the man from behind, disarming him and knocking him unconscious in a matter of seconds. Meanwhile, Maya crept toward another man, her steps as quiet as a whisper. The man's back was turned as he scanned the trees with a flashlight, giving her the perfect opportunity to strike. She delivered a sharp blow to the back of his head, and he crumpled to the ground. The remaining 2 men, realizing something was wrong, regrouped near the truck. "Where are they?" one of them hissed, his eyes darting wildly. Jordan stepped out of the shadows, his pistol trained on them. "Right here." The men barely had time to react before Maya appeared behind them, her weapon raised. "Drop your guns," she said, her voice calm but firm. They hesitated, but the look in her eyes left no room for argument. Slowly, they complied, dropping their weapons to the ground. Jordan and Maya disarmed the men and tied them to a nearby tree, ensuring they couldn't follow. As they finished, Jordan leaned in close to one of them. "Tell your boss this ends now," he said, his tone deadly serious. "If he keeps coming after us, he won't like what happens next." The man glared at him but said nothing. Maya stepped forward, her gaze icy. And make sure he understands one thing. We're not the ones running scared. As the couple disappeared into the night, leaving the tied-up men behind, Maya glanced at Jordan. Think they'll get the message? Jordan shrugged. Doesn't matter. We've got the upper hand now, and we're not stopping until this is over. Maya nodded, her determination unwavering. Let's find your journalist friend. The sooner we blow this thing wide open, the better. The couple pressed on, their resolve stronger than ever. But deep down, they knew the fight was far from over, and the closer they got to the truth, the more dangerous the road ahead would become. Jordan and Maya moved swiftly through the dense forest, sticking to the shadows as dawn began to break over the horizon. The faint golden light offered a fleeting sense of hope, but both knew the danger wasn't far behind. The weight of the documents in Jordan's pack and the constant threat of pursuit kept their senses razor sharp. Their destination was clear, a small diner on the outskirts of a nearby town where Jordan's contact, a former investigative journalist named David Cole, often worked on his freelance projects. David was known for exposing corruption and criminal networks, making him the perfect ally in their fight against the smuggling operation. You're sure he'll be there? Maya asked as they approached the edge of the forest, the faint hum of traffic in the distance. Jordan nodded. He's predictable. Coffee, a laptop, and a corner booth. If he's not there, we'll find him somewhere close. Maya glanced at him, her brow furrowed. What if he's part of the system? What if we can't trust him? Jordan hesitated for a moment, then shook his head. David's not the type to sell out. He's taken risks before, even when it put a target on his back. If anyone can help us, it's him. The diner was quiet when they arrived, the morning rush still an hour away. Jordan spotted David immediately, sitting in his usual corner booth, a steaming cup of coffee in front of him and his laptop open. He looked older than Jordan remembered, his hair streaked with gray and lines of fatigue etched into his face, but his sharp eyes hadn't lost their edge. David, Jordan said as they approached the booth. David glanced up, surprise flickering across his face. Jordan? What the... His eyes shifted to Maya, then to the tired, determined expressions on both their faces. You're in trouble, aren't you? Big trouble, Jordan admitted, sliding into the booth across from him. Maya sat beside him, her gaze scanning the diner for any signs of danger. David leaned back in his seat, crossing his arms. Let me guess. Whatever it is, it's messy, dangerous, and you need my help. Jordan pulled the documents from his pack and placed them on the table. You could say that. David's eyebrows shot up as he flipped through the pages, his expression growing more serious with each passing second. This is huge, he muttered. Where did you get this? It's a long story, Maya said. The short version is, we stumbled into something we weren't supposed to see, and now the people behind it want us dead. David closed the folder, his expression grim. Smuggling, corruption, ties to government officials. This could take down a lot of powerful people, but it's also a death sentence for anyone who gets too close. We don't have a choice, Jordan said firmly. They've already come after us. If we don't expose this, they'll keep coming until we're dead. David stared at them for a long moment, his fingers tapping rhythmically on the table. Finally, he sighed. All right, I'll help you, but we need to be smart about this. If we go public too soon, they'll bury this and us before anyone even sees it. What do you suggest? Maya asked, leaning forward. We need to verify the information, David said. Cross-check the names, find more evidence to back this up. Once we have an airtight case, we leak it to trusted sources, journalists, activists, even international organizations. The more eyes on this, the harder it'll be for them to cover it up. Jordan nodded. Where do we start? David pulled out a notepad, scribbling down a list of names and locations. These are some of the names mentioned in the documents. If we can tie them to specific crimes or transactions, we'll have a solid foundation. But we'll have to move fast. The people on this list won't hesitate to eliminate anyone who gets in their way. As they discussed their plan, Maya's instincts prickled. She glanced toward the diner's entrance and noticed a man in a leather jacket standing near the door, his eyes lingering on their table for a moment too long before he turned away. We've got company, she murmured, her hand subtly resting on the pistol concealed under her jacket. Jordan followed her gaze, his body tensing. How many? Just one so far, she said. But if he's watching us, there's more nearby. David frowned, glancing toward the door. You weren't followed, were you? Not intentionally, Jordan said. But these guys have resources. They probably picked up our trail as soon as we left the cabin. David cursed under his breath. All right, change of plans. We can't stay here. Follow me. David led them out the back door of the diner, through the kitchen and into a narrow alley. The sounds of the city grew louder as they emerged onto a busy street, blending into the morning crowd. They'll be looking for you, David said, his voice low. We need to lay low until we can regroup. Jordan scanned the crowd, his eyes searching for any signs of pursuit. Where can we go? I've got a safe house a few blocks from here, David said. It's not much, but it's secure. Maya glanced over her shoulder, her senses on high alert. Let's move. They won't take long to catch up. The safe house was a small, nondescript apartment tucked above a rundown convenience store. David unlocked the door and ushered them inside, bolting it securely behind them. Jordan and Maya immediately began checking the windows and exits, ensuring there were no weak points. Meanwhile, David booted up an old desktop computer and spread the documents across the small dining table. This is where the real work begins, David said, typing rapidly. We'll dig into these names, follow the money, and see just how deep this thing goes. Maya crossed her arms, her expression serious. And when they come looking for us? David glanced up, his eyes sharp. Then we make sure they regret it. David's small apartment felt suffocatingly quiet as he pored over the documents, his brow furrowed in concentration. The old desktop computer hummed as he cross-referenced the names and locations from the files with public records, news reports, and other sources. Jordan and Maya sat across from him, their eyes constantly scanning the windows and doors for any sign of danger. This is bigger than I thought, David muttered, scribbling notes on a legal pad. These aren't just small-time criminals. They're tied to politicians, business tycoons, even law enforcement. Maya leaned forward, her sharp eyes narrowing. You're saying the people who are after us could have the police on their payroll? David nodded grimly. It's not just a possibility, it's a certainty. Jordan crossed his arms, his jaw tightening. Then we can't trust anyone. If we hand this over to the wrong person, we'll be dead before the ink dries. David looked up, his expression serious. That's why we need to be careful. We expose this the right way, and we can bring them all down. But if we make a mistake, Maya finished his thought, we don't get a second chance. Hours passed as David dug deeper, and the tension in the room grew heavier with each passing minute. Finally, he leaned back in his chair, a triumphant glint in his eyes. I've got something, he said, turning the screen toward Jordan and Maya. This name, Richard Calloway, keeps coming up. He's a wealthy investor with ties to several shell companies that match the ones in these documents. Calloway, Jordan said, his brow furrowing. That name sounds familiar. He's been in the news a few times, David explained, mostly for his philanthropy. But behind the scenes, he's been funding smuggling operations, laundering money, and bribing officials to cover it all up. Maya's eyes narrowed. If we can tie him directly to this operation, it'll blow the whole thing wide open. David nodded. Exactly, and I think I know how. We need to verify the information, David said. Cross-check the names, find more evidence to back this up. Once we have an airtight case, we leak it to trusted sources, journalists, activists, even international organizations. The more eyes on this, the harder it'll be for them to cover it up. Jordan nodded. Where do we start? David pulled out a notepad, scribbling down a list of names and locations. These are some of the names mentioned in the documents. If we can tie them to specific crimes or transactions, we'll have a solid foundation. But we'll have to move fast. The people on this list won't hesitate to eliminate anyone who gets in their way. As they discussed their plan, Maya's instincts prickled. She glanced toward the diner's entrance and noticed a man in a leather jacket standing near the door, his eyes lingering on their table for a moment too long before he turned away. We've got company, she murmured, her hand subtly resting on the pistol concealed under her jacket. Jordan followed her gaze, his body tensing. How many? Just one so far, she said. But if he's watching us, there's more nearby. David frowned, glancing toward the door. You weren't followed, were you? Not intentionally, Jordan said. But these guys have resources. They probably picked up our trail as soon as we left the cabin. David cursed under his breath. All right, change of plans. We can't stay here. Follow me. David led them out the back door of the diner, through the kitchen and into a narrow alley. The sounds of the city grew louder as they emerged onto a busy street, blending into the morning crowd. They'll be looking for you, David said, his voice low. We need to lay low until we can regroup. Jordan scanned the crowd, his eyes searching for any signs of pursuit. Where can we go? I've got a safe house a few blocks from here, David said. It's not much, but it's secure. Maya glanced over her shoulder, her senses on high alert. Let's move. They won't take long to catch up. The safe house was a small, nondescript apartment tucked above a rundown convenience store. David unlocked the door and ushered them inside, bolting it securely behind them. Jordan and Maya immediately began checking the windows and exits, ensuring there were no weak points. Meanwhile, David booted up an old desktop computer and spread the documents across the small dining table. This is where the real work begins, David said, typing rapidly. We'll dig into these names, follow the money, and see just how deep this thing goes. Maya crossed her arms, her expression serious. And when they come looking for us? David glanced up, his eyes sharp. Then we make sure they regret it. David's small apartment felt suffocatingly quiet as he pored over the documents, his brow furrowed in concentration. The old desktop computer hummed as he cross-referenced the names and locations from the files with public records, news reports, and other sources. Jordan and Maya sat across from him, their eyes constantly scanning the windows and doors for any sign of danger. This is bigger than I thought, David muttered, scribbling notes on a legal pad. These aren't just small-time criminals. They're tied to politicians, business tycoons, even law enforcement. Maya leaned forward, her sharp eyes narrowing. You're saying the people who are after us could have the police on their payroll? David nodded grimly. It's not just a possibility, it's a certainty. Jordan crossed his arms, his jaw tightening. Then we can't trust anyone. If we hand this over to the wrong person, we'll be dead before the ink dries. David looked up, his expression serious. That's why we need to be careful. We expose this the right way, and we can bring them all down. But if we make a mistake, Maya finished his thought, we don't get a second chance. Hours passed as David dug deeper, and the tension in the room grew heavier with each passing minute. Finally, he leaned back in his chair, a triumphant glint in his eyes. I've got something, he said, turning the screen toward Jordan and Maya. This name, Richard Calloway, keeps coming up. He's a wealthy investor with ties to several shell companies that match the ones in these documents. Calloway, Jordan said, his brow furrowing. That name sounds familiar. He's been in the news a few times, David explained, mostly for his philanthropy. But behind the scenes, he's been funding smuggling operations, laundering money, and bribing officials to cover it all up. Maya's eyes narrowed. If we can tie him directly to this operation, it'll blow the whole thing wide open. David nodded. Exactly, and I think I know how. They spotted 2 more guards near the back of the warehouse, their conversation casual as they leaned against a stack of crates. Distraction or takedown? Maya whispered. Takedown, Jordan replied. We can't risk them raising an alarm. They moved in unison, their actions synchronized from years of training. Within moments, the guards were incapacitated, leaving the warehouse eerily quiet once more. Jordan and Maya began searching the crates, their eyes scanning for anything that could tie the warehouse to Calloway. Finally, Maya found a set of ledgers tucked inside a metal locker near the back of the building. These are it, she said, flipping through the pages. Shipping manifests, payment records. It's all here. Jordan nodded, a small smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. This is the proof we need. Their victory was short-lived. As they prepared to leave, the sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the warehouse. Jordan and Maya exchanged a tense glance, their hands tightening on their weapons. "They're here," Maya said. Jordan nodded. "Then let's give them a reason to regret it."